We were unsuccessful in our path to the Super Bowl. We were an injured quarterback away from making it to the biggest game of them all, but now we have to move on to the offseason. Let's begin. There are 3 players considering retirement this season: Pittman, Wynn, and Goff. Michael Pittman was traded for this past season. I have little faith in Porter as a backup, and with his contract expiring as well, I might have to consider talking Pittman out of retirement. Pittman did have a decent season with the team. I thought maybe he would last longer like Lamar Smith, but that wasn't the case. I like having a veteran presence behind Tomlinson, even though Tomlinson is already getting up there in age. I did consider bringing him back, but he was very expensive, not worth the value. Pittman will be retiring. Mike Goff is an original on the team, was a starter at one point, but he has since declined to the last spot on the depth chart. We have solid players at that position. I would like to keep as many originals as possible, but it doesn't make sense to bring Goff back, mainly because he's super expensive. Goff will be retiring. The last player is Ronaldo Wynn, who we also traded for this past season. He hardly saw the field at all. There's really no reason I could think of to bring him back if I'm spending money on a player who's never going to see the field. Wynn will be retiring. We're now off to the resigning period, which I'm overwhelmed with since we have so many big names to resign. Big names at big positions that want big money. At least we got a little over $1.5 million back from the retired players, and I'm hoping we still have enough to sign the big names and our draft picks. Going by positions, the quarterbacks are first. We have Breeze and Owen who need new contracts. Breeze was signed during the playoffs right before the AFC Championship game. I thought he played well enough that we could have gone to the Super Bowl, but he was put in a little too late. Truth is, there's a reason I traded him back in year 2. He's not a guy that can elevate the team. I'm not bringing him back. Pedro Owen played 1 game in his 3-year career, and it was in his rookie season. This past year, he was forced into the spotlight due to a dirty hit on Lewis and did well. Before coming back to reality in the AFC Championship game, Owen was a replacement for Doug Flutie. He played as well as him, but like Flutie, I think his time in San Diego has come to an end. Owen will not be back. I talked about how Porter was on an expired contract. He's our only backup in this position. I was super excited when I signed him as a rookie, but his low production and rating decline is more than enough for me to move on from him. Porter will not be back. We have one receiver who needs a new contract, Tim Dwight, though next season's going to be rough with Moss and Woods in their final years coming up. The last time I gave Dwight a contract, I felt like it was more than likely the last contract he was ever going to get with the team. You can see his production gone down each season, but he's an original, been reliable when we needed him. Is this the year we move on from him? Nope. I gave him another 2-year deal. It's a team-friendly contract. I honestly didn't want to move on from him. Plus, if an injury were to happen to Bernard, we have insurance. At tight end, we have an expired contract behind the 2 starters. You guys remember Chris Wilson, the guy we signed back in year 1 when Gates got injured? He's fast, decent blocker. The problem is he's never going to see the field as a 3rd tight end, simulating anyways. He's not coming back. We do have to make a choice here with Wells and Lindsey. Both are on expired contracts, and trading one of them last year would have been a smart choice, but I was afraid of injuries. Wells is a much more balanced center, a bit more speed and run block ability. He's been the starter for the past few seasons, while Lindsey was a surprise draft pick that ended up being pretty good at pass protection. His slow speed does mean he can get beat by blitzes and stunts. I ended up bringing back Wells. His contract is cheaper as the years go on and shorter, while Lindsey is more expensive in the long run. He's not coming back. We're now at one of the bigger players that we need to bring back, Terrence Pratt. He's our first ever pick in this series. We chose him over a quarterback. I think we made the right choice. His speed is his biggest weakness, along with his low strength. Tends to be beat a lot by fast edge players. Other than that, he's our best offensive lineman. I give him a full 7-year deal. He's the face of this offensive line and this rebuild. He's coming back. We're now finally getting to the defensive side of the re-signings. We have a defensive tackle in need of a new contract, Ryan Bingham. I'm fairly certain he's an original. He's coming back. No. Another big name that I need to consider bringing back is James Hall. Traded for him back in year 3, and he's since been a cornerstone on this defense. One of the best trades I've ever had in this entire series. He's going to be in our Ring of Honor when it's all said and done. He's been great since the trade. Obviously, the past year was a down year, but even in a down year, he's pretty good. My only hope is he's not on a decline in production and can return back to his previous 10-sack season performance. He only wanted a 2-year deal, which will be a good deal if he declines this coming season. It will let me get ready to move on from him by the second year. A few seasons ago, we signed Ben Lieber to a lengthy contract. He's been great with us ever since. Can Jimmy Henderson go the same way? He was having a breakout season before his injury last year. He did return for the playoffs, but you still have to think the effects of the injury could cause him to regress this coming season. I took a chance on him like I did with Lieber. His contract is also on par with Lieber. One of the last big names we need to resign is the leader of this defense and recently the leader of the team, Roger Clark. He's the best player we have on the team, and in his position, nobody is close to him. He had a down year, but he was still productive. Good players have okay seasons. It's how they respond after that season that proves they're great. I once heard a quote that goes, "On balance, off balance, doesn't matter to me, still better than you." Yeah. That's Clark. He's good no matter what. It's a no-brainer to bring him back. Unfortunately, it's going to cost a pretty penny, at least in his first 2 seasons, or 3 in the new contract. Still cheaper than Mike Brown. The last player we need to resign is Delbert Ferguson. We haven't been particularly strong at strong safety in this series since we've started, and we're still struggling after all these years. Delbert Ferguson could change that this coming season. He picked off Tom Brady in the AFC Championship game. He's barely going into his 3rd season. He could be the future at this spot. I gave him a contract that we can easily get out of if we need to, but he's still going to get paid his first year on it. Now you can see why I was so overwhelmed. We started with over $26 million to work with in resigning players. We're now down to $2.5 million. I don't think that's enough to sign our draft picks. I mean, we can sign them and go over the cap, but we're going to definitely have to let some players go after the draft, which is a bummer because in free agency, there was my favorite player, Zach Thomas. I really wanted to sign him, but I definitely didn't have the money to spend, which meant I would be skipping this year's free agency before we head on to the draft. I wanted to make some more cap space. I was interested in letting go of Sammy Davis. He's an original on the team, but as you can see, hardly been on the field. I'm letting him go, which will get us above $3 million. I probably shouldn't have brought back Tim Dwight, but since we have him, I figure we can let go of some of the lower rated receivers. Kevin Lloyd won't save much, but pennies do add up. I drafted Kevin Lloyd going into season 4. He's improved a lot since then, but on this team, he'd be the 5th best receiver, and I feel like he could find a starting job somewhere else. I am in need of a backup quarterback, so I did a player-for-player trade with Seattle for Wendell Bass. He's a very mediocre quarterback, not great accuracy, weak arm, decent read coverage, but I was really interested in his speed. My biggest problem with Owen was how slow he was. I can guarantee you, if an injury happens to Lewis again, my plan is to run a gimmick offense. While Kevin Lloyd will get the opportunity to start in Seattle this upcoming season, I hope the former 7th round pick does well with the Seahawks. We're now just under $3 million with that trade, and I still want to clear out some cap space. I consider moving on from Kenny Hoffman. He was a 4th round pick this past year, and he's basically a depth player at this point in his career. I believe he can be a starter, but with Lieber and Henderson on the team, that's not going to happen with us. So I decided to make a wild trade with the Cowboys, Hoffman and our 1st round pick for their 2nd, 4th, and next year's 3rd. The reason I made this trade was because I didn't want to deal with an expensive 1st round contract, and there wasn't really anyone I really wanted in the 1st round. The trade allows us to drop 8 spots, gained an additional 4th and a 3rd next year, plus I'm no longer restricted to quarterback, running back, defensive end, or tackle. If I had an early 1st rounder, then I would consider drafting a running back or a defensive end, but considering how low we are, I'll pass. The other plus about this trade is it now gives Hoffman an opportunity to start with Dallas. It's a win-win. We're now back to 3.5 under the cap, and another player I was interested in releasing was Michael Parker. We signed him as we're going into the playoffs. He ended up having that crucial fumble recovery against Oakland that helped stop all their momentum. I appreciate that moment, but I think it's better that he hits free agency and cashes in on the play. I let him go. We're now $4 million under the cap. Will that be enough for the draft? I don't think so, but we're gonna go to the draft draft anyways, skipping the first round and going straight to the second. With the pick we got from Dallas, we selected a guard. I know what you're thinking. Why draft a lineman? I'm planning on moving on from Finoti. I figured this guy will be cheaper, along with the fact that I do believe strongly in the game being won in the trenches. I know we have a solid line, but I want a great one. With our original second round pick, I selected a cornerback. I don't think this was the best draft class. Maybe we reached on Jerome, but I'm definitely not happy with selecting a depth player with a late second round pick. Thankfully, this was a position that we had pretty decent depth in already. In the third round, I selected a wide receiver. Obviously, with Randy Moss being in his final year, I had to get ready to potentially replace him. I don't think Owen will do that, but maybe he'll be like Bernard and develop over the years to be a solid third. With our first fourth round pick from the Dallas trade, I selected another guard. We've drafted guards with both our draft picks from Dallas. Don't worry, I have a plan on what I want to do. Roderick Ferguson is decent depth for the position. I'm happy with both these selections. With our late fourth round pick, I went ahead and selected another receiver. I'll be honest with you guys, I'm at a point where I just don't know who to draft. I probably should have traded out of these spots, but I'm just gonna get the best player available at this point, which is why I said earlier, this might be a weak draft class. In the fifth round, I decided to go quarterback. Steve Briggs has a strong arm and some legs, but he can't hit water standing in the ocean. I like having 3 quarterbacks on the team. Briggs will be sitting behind Bass this coming season. I rather not have a rookie be the backup this season. I forgot we had an extra 6th round pick with the trade that we have with the Panthers. In exchange for Fields, we drafted a center. Depth selection, we let Lindsey go this offseason. I want to at least have someone ready just in case an injury happens. With our original 6th round pick, we selected an outside linebacker, traded away Hoffman. This is a replacement player. He's depth, really not much to it. The final player we selected in the 7th round was a free safety. This was another best player available selection. Turns out he was better than my entire draft class except for Jared Richardson. After signing all the rookies, we're now $2.5 million over the cap, but there's a reason I drafted those guards. We now have trade options. First trade being Finoti for Chris Brown. Look, I understand I try to do my best to make this series as realistic as possible, but I think this season I kind of jumped the shark and I do apologize for it. We needed a backup to LT and now we have one, and he was already a backup in Tennessee, wasn't seeing too much playing time. Now he'll get an opportunity to take over if we choose to let LT go next year. While the Titans get a solid starter at guard for their team, I think it's a fair trade, but I can also see it being unrealistic. Still not done clearing cap space. Since we went more over with the last trade, Hammond ended up being way better than expected. I'd love to cut Brown, but we'd lose more money. I can't let him go until the penalty goes lower than the salary, but Pratt is looking like a good trade option. I ended up sending him to Washington for a 4th round pick. He'll get an opportunity to start there on his new team. Next player I was interested in moving on was Parks. I remember when I gave him that terrible contract extension. I was so hopeful in him being the next big thing. I remember when we drafted him to take over Donnie Edwards, then it all fell apart. I sent him to the Texans for a 4th round pick as well. He'll get an opportunity to start to prove he can still be a starter in this league. We also added 2 receivers in the draft, which means I'll be looking to move on from a few of them. Matthew Burgess was traded to Indianapolis for a 3rd round pick. Like I said, I jumped the shark. I'm sorry. I had just drafted him this past season. He didn't develop as quickly as I had hoped he would have during his first year. He will be their number 3 receiver on the team. He'll also get a chance to prove he's a starter this season. We're still not done. I decided to move on from Nelson. We traded for him a few years back. He's been solid, but Richard's on the team now and made Nelson expendable. Sent him to Arizona for a 3rd round pick. He will also be a starter there. All trades I make are to get my players to be starters somewhere else. Next player I want to move on from is Hodges. I believe he was the player that had the interception against Oakland in the wild card. He helped us win that game, but he's never going to start here. I want to move on from him while his stock is high. I sent him to Buffalo for a 4th round pick. He is their 3rd best corner now on their team. There's going to be a lot of players I need to check at the end of the year to see how their season went. Before we go to the roster to get under the cap, I released 2 rookies. rookies. Angel Dunn was one of them, the other being Mark Roy. It pains me to let him go, but I can't start the season till I do, or if I let someone else go. Randy Moss. Last year we lost all our preseason games. This year we won them all. Will that translate to the season? Before we head to the season, let's look at the roster. Roger Clark once again leads this team. He did slightly improve over his previous year. It doesn't show in his overall, but his coverage did go up by a point. We also have a new player on here in Morris Hardy. It was just a matter of time before he broke into the elite list of players. Unfortunately, no Moss, no Tomlinson. They both regressed this season compared to last year. The window for them to contribute to a Super Bowl is more than likely ending after this season. Lewis is going to be the starter. This is his team, but I think this is the best the quarterback room has looked. It's much better than it was last year. If an injury goes down, we're still screwed, but a little less screwed. I think we're seeing the rapid decline of a future Hall of Famer in LT. This is more than likely going to be his final season with the team unless he is cheap. I'm glad I traded for Chris Brown, but it's not like he's a spring chicken either. We're going to have to draft a running back eventually. Last year, Hardy started the season injured, but this year he's going to be ready to go. Rodgers got some playing time behind him, and with only 2 running backs on the roster, he's probably going to get some playing time if an injury happens. Fullbacks are extremely useful in this game. Randy Moss also started the season injured last year. Could be the reason for his regression, but either way, he's still the leading receiver on the team. But Adrian Woods had a 9 overall bump this season, and it makes me think that we'll more than likely move on from Moss unless he's cheap and roll with Woods as our number 1 next year. Antonio Gaze keeps getting an overall rating boost each season, and I don't understand it. I keep thinking I'm going to move on from him, but he just keeps getting better, and I shouldn't be complaining about this, but I just don't understand it.
You can't keep getting away with it!
Wells got a new contract this offseason that's paying starter money, which is fine because he is a starter, but the rookie Fleming is looking like a decent backup in case of an injury. I'm a bit upset Wells didn't improve. It helps that the rest of the offensive line is good. It doesn't help that Campbell regressed though. Still a solid line, but with the addition of Richards, I do think the offensive line is better than last year. One of the reasons I think it's better is that Pratt and Hicks both improved by 1 point. The offensive line has come a long way since the start of the series. Hopefully this means the running game can be more effective and the passing game can be more dangerous. Moving over to the defensive side, Henderson started the season last year injured, but he did definitely regress. I'm still very happy with the progress of Sandoval. I don't quite understand the glitch that the second stringer doesn't see the field, but he'll continue to be the backup to Colin, who has improved drastically in his second year. This is the best the defensive line has been. I can't say I'm happy with the development of Floyd, but he's still a solid player at the position, while Hall continues to be the best edge player on the team, even if he did regress slightly. I'm expecting a similar productive season from this group compared to the past 3 seasons. Lieber improved slightly. I'm telling you, he's absolutely Mr. Reliable on this team. You need someone to bring you a cup of coffee every day? Lieber. You need someone to fix your flat tire? Lieber. You need someone to get you pregnant? Lieber. Have you seen him recently? He's gorgeous. I'm also not sure about Henderson's contract now, but who knows? Maybe he'll be the next Mr. Reliable. He was injured last year. We're only going to rock 2 inside linebackers this year, mainly because we have no money. I think Sparks will be fine if another injury doesn't happen, while Ortiz improved way more than I expected, and I think we should be good here. Every year I struggle to improve the cornerback position. Jammer had a slight regression. Porter hasn't become the player that Clark has become, while Florence is slowly getting better each season, but still isn't starter quality. I think we have better depth this year, but I'd rather have a second starter that's solid. I don't know why, but every year it seems like I struggle to find a good strong safety. I can't develop them or find any in free agency, and Ferguson looks like he hit a wall. We'll see if his stats improve at the end of the season. The worst contract I've ever given, Mike Brown, 90 overall at one point. All I know is I can cut him after this season and get $2 million back in cap space. I think it's absolutely worth it. I don't know if Hammond is the future, but I know Brown isn't. We have a kicker in the 80s, guys. We should just end it here, rebuild over. Sadly, Cypress regressed this season. I don't plan on moving on from him. We're finally here at the regular season. The season opener will be against the Pittsburgh Steelers. It already looks like this team is ready to go and get back into the playoffs. The offense was popping off and the defense was playing well. Let's see if we can keep it up for the rest of the year. Our home opener will be against the division rivals, the Oakland Raiders. They took our division crown last year after we started 7-0. Can we take it this year? This game wasn't as close as the score says it was. A garbage touchdown by the Chargers made it look respectable, but San Diego got bullied against the Raiders. I'm not sure what to think of this team. We blew Pittsburgh away, got blown out by Oakland. What can we do against Kansas City? We used to struggle against the Chiefs. We still do, but we used to too. Looks like this defense is struggling, unable to get a stop to get Lewis and the offense the ball for the fourth quarter comeback. It looks like the Pittsburgh game was a fluke. It looks like we're taking on the Indianapolis Colts. This is to get back to 500, and it'll also be Drew Brees' revenge game as he's the current starter for Indianapolis. We didn't allow Drew Brees to get the better of us, and it was the second win of the season. If we're not scoring 31 points, then we're not gonna win. Odd that it's the exact same score from the Pittsburgh game. Other than the Raiders, the schedule has been pretty easy so far, but the biggest test of the season is up against the Philadelphia Eagles. Up 24-7 at halftime and lost 27-33. We tried our best to replicate the Dolphins-Jets Monday night comeback. This is probably one of the worst losses I've had in the series. They scored with no time, should have won this game. Instead, we're now 2-3. To make matters worse, we have no depth and Ortiz is out for the entire season. Ferguson will also miss a few games. You know how to cheer a team up after losing? Have them play against the Broncos. If there were more time on the clock, I think the Chargers would have lost this game. They let the Broncos come right back in the final quarter, and after it looked like it was going to be a blowout, I don't have confidence in this team right now. Look who else got injured. The team is broken, and I can't sign any depth players. We better hope we don't get more injuries. If you add all the wins of the teams we've beaten, it's 3. That's how many wins Washington has right now. We have yet to beat a team with a winning record. We got our first win against a team with a winning record, which is now debatable since they're 3-3. I'm counting it. I do want to point out that Lewis has been really accurate this season. That was something that was missing with Rivers. We're getting closer to the midway point of the season. Can we get to the midway point over 500 with a win against the 2-4 Jets?
Lewis calls signals at the 12-yard line. He's so dangerous, buying time, moves out of the pocket, fires.
We still haven't beaten a good team, but starting 1-2, I'm happy to be 5-3. The playoff push begins in the second half. I'm just worried we're a fake good team. After a bye week, we now have a great test to see how good of a team we are against the New York Giants. I'm beginning to believe, guys. Do you believe? Lewis went off in this game. We're now 6-3 on a 4-game win streak. We got our statement win of the year and another statement game against the Chiefs to let the division know we're not the same team we were in the first month of the season.
Lewis surveys the defense at the 25. Extra receiver is split out. That's the tight end. Even though he's got double coverage, heads it.
What a wild finish to this game. In the final seconds, Lewis throws the go-ahead touchdown to win the game. I think we found our quarterback of the future after all these years. Rivers didn't work out, Breeze didn't work out, Fields didn't work out, Flutie was there. I think the future is looking good. While I may have spoken too soon, there was an injury to Clark, but it wasn't too serious. When you're on a 5-game win streak and you want to keep it going, you know what helps? Going up against the Broncos. You know, I expected a higher scoring game from the Chargers, but the Broncos always seem to give us a challenge. They don't win, but they challenge. This win also gave us our second straight non-losing season. Can we make it a second straight winning season against the Raiders? They've fallen off hard after starting the season 6-0. Even though Clark was injured, he was healthy enough to play and helped with the comeback against the Raiders. They've now dropped 6 straight games while the Chargers have won 7 straight. All the Chargers need to do is win 2 games and they'll clinch the division. 4 weeks to go, and as of now they're sitting at the number 2 seed. Another scenario is if we win this game against Houston and the Raiders lose, we will clinch the division. I didn't show the game cast for this one because this was the score early, then the rest of the game was exchanging punts back and forth. We did get our 10th win of the season in a very lackluster showing. There was another minor injury. Berrien was hurt, will be hurt for 2 weeks. On the brighter side, we are the number 1 seed as of now, still haven't clinched the division due to the Raiders winning their first game in almost 2 months, but we are guaranteed to be in the playoffs. With a win here against the Titans, we can win the division title. This is our first loss since week 5. Something interesting did happen though. There was a safety, but it awarded 2 points to the Titans. We still lost by more than a touchdown, but I'm a bit salty about that. With the loss, we've dropped to 3rd in the playoff seeding. The Raiders are only 2 games down now. We better not have a complete meltdown. It doesn't help that LT is injured and will be on the medical report for the next 3 weeks. Oh, and before we go to the next week, Phillip Rivers and Drew Brees had their first ever head-to-head meeting.
Ontario Smith is in the backfield at the 37-yard line, gets the pitch, spins right there, whoop! And then at the 20, the 15, the 10, the 5, touchdown!
Back to the Chargers with 2 weeks left to go. This game against Jacksonville will decide who earns themselves a bye week in the playoffs. Once again, Roger Clark snagged a late 4th quarter interception to help the Chargers win the game. This team has shown they can go toe-to-toe with the best teams in the NFL. I'm excited to see how the playoffs are going to go. As you can see, we have the first round bye. We could technically earn home field advantage if the Bengals lose. Unfortunately, the guy I said was Mr. Reliable on the offensive side got injured. He'll miss the playoffs. The final game of the year is going to be against the Cowboys. I'm benching all my starters to avoid a random injury that could happen. It was a very lackluster game. We already clinched the week off. I didn't want to risk further injuries for home field advantage. It's also a good thing I didn't play for it, as we wouldn't have gotten it with the Bengals winning 13 games. Sadly, with little depth on our team due to cap restraints, Chris Brown had to play and was injured. He might be able to play injured, but thankfully LT should be back for the divisional round. On to the team stats. They finished 11th for total offense. Their passing game was 9th in the NFL. It's come a long way, hasn't it, gang? While we were 11th in rushing, we're basically a top 10 team. Almost. I'm digging it. The defense wasn't as good this year, 22nd in total defense, 19th in pass defense, while we were 18th in rush defense. Alfredo Lewis had a fantastic season, possibly the best season I've had in any rebuild in 2K5. I think it's fair to say that he really is the franchise quarterback. Started 2 seasons and won 10 games in each of them. He's improved his average while also throwing more touchdowns and less interceptions. I think the writing is on the wall. LT isn't what he used to be anymore. We're going to have to look for a new running back this offseason. But let's try and get him a ring before we let him finish his career somewhere else. We might have a decent stopgap in Chris Brown, but he was also injured this season. He's also going to the back half of his career like LT. Running back is on the to-do list this coming year. Morris Hardy is a player that might not get a lot of love, but to be a check down guy or a safety valve for Lewis is is so crucial. He's been excellent taking over the big shoes of Lorenzo Neal. Adrian Woods may not be the best receiver in the NFL, but he's in the category of very good. He put up another solid season with the team. I want him to break 1,000 yards, but that's really hard to do in this game, and I think I got lucky with Moss that one season. Speaking of Moss, he had another okay season. No injuries this year, no excuses. I think like LT, his time has run out in the NFL as a starter. He's on the decline, but let's try and get him a ring before it's all said and done. I think we've seen the limit of what Berrien can do. It's not bad. He's basically taken over the role of Tim Dwight. I'm happy to see how far he's come on this team. I still don't understand how he keeps getting a rating boost. Onto the defense, and Jimmy Henderson has let me down. I was expecting a Ben Lieber type season, but it was just mid. James Hall though, he's back to those double-digit sacks, 10 on the season. I'm surprised he performed so well. I thought we were going to see a decline in his numbers again, but he hasn't even begun to peak. Philip Henderson is third on the depth chart, but he keeps playing and I don't know why. He did well, but I'd rather have Sandoval getting the playing time. Obviously for Colin, I wasn't expecting a great season like his rookie year. He still did pretty well and I have a lot of value for his ability to stuff the run. Ben Lieber is just the best. I don't even remember seeing this man play, but damn it if he isn't slowly becoming my favorite Chargers player. Roger Clark comes back with a strong season. The dude is the best player I've selected in this series and probably in all of my series. He pretty much won 2 games for us. Mike Brown. Delbert Ferguson is about as average as it gets, but we're not paying him almost $10 million a year to do it. Cornelius Hammond might be in the running for starting free safety next season. Felipe Sparks is a fun name to say, but he's a fun player to have on the team. He's taken over as a leader, and since he's the only starting inside linebacker on the team, we need to cover him in bubble wrap. Just wanted to point out, Jeraden Florence had his first ever career interception. It took 7 years, but he got one. He also had a return for a touchdown, and that is why I kept him on this team. He's a great returner. It's so strange not to worry about the kicker. Another solid season from Wright. I also don't get why Cypress regressed this year, but he should do better next year, rating wise, because this was his best season since 2006. We're not done looking at player cards. All the former players I let go, let's see how they did. First and foremost, I did briefly look at Rivers. He almost had a Jameis Winston year. Drew Brees had a better season, but it's not like their team was succeeding with them. They only had 3 wins. Hugo Nelson was a guy I originally wanted over Lewis. If Lewis didn't work out as well as he did, I definitely would have buyer's remorse, but this could be our Tua and Herbert rivalry. Philip Fields is still in the league. Oh, how naive I was. Peter Sparks was a player I passed on in our first year in the draft. I selected Pratt instead, and I think we can all agree I made the right choice. Pedro Owen found a backup job in Minnesota. Good for him. Floyd Porter was a bad signing, and we let him walk this offseason. He got picked up by Kansas City. I also noticed Kenneth McBride was in free agency. Gates single-handedly killed this man's career, turned him into a draft bust. Mark Roy is a free agent, and I might sign him to replace the injured Dwight for the playoffs. McBride can't find a job, but Wilson can continue to be paid to warm the bench. Speed can get you a job in the NFL. Bernard Lindsey went on to Minnesota, and I'm okay with this since he didn't progress too much over Wells. Ryan Bigham, I think we all knew he was going to be a free agent. Sammy Davis found a new home with Atlanta, played 1 game. Kevin Lloyd is the biggest bummer because he was having a decent season, but an injury ended his year. I hope it doesn't slow his development. Kenny Hoffman was an absolute steal for the Cowboys. He went off, kind of, in his year with them. I'm so proud of Michael Parker. We gave him an opportunity to shine in the playoff game, let him find a new team, and all he did was get 5.5 sacks, no biggie, though I wish I kept him because now we need him. Finoti wasn't able to finish the season healthy. Looks like the Chris Brown trade could be considered a draw so far. Preston Pratt wasn't terrible with Washington, but I wouldn't be surprised if he's a free agent next year. Eugene Parks had pretty much the type of season he he was having with us before Sparks took his job. He's solid, he's not great, he's okay. He's a stopgap player. Matthew Burgess gets reunited with Breeze. He was the first player Breeze targeted in the playoff game against New England. He had an okay year. Bruce Nelson is looking like he might be on his decline, still decent, but his better days may be behind him. I didn't realize how many players I traded and let go, but it was a lot, and most of them were contributing. Hodges, not so much. Not bad for depth, though. I let 2 rookies go, Mark Roy and Angel Dunn. This one I might regret later, but nice to see he was picked up by someone. Really quickly, before we finish the video, McNabb won the MVP. The Offensive Player of the Year was Peyton Manning. Defensive Player of the Year was Jason Babin. The Offensive Rookie of the Year was Brad Andrews. And the Defensive Rookie of the Year was Frederick Phillips. Of the 4 teams in the wildcard round, we've beaten 3 of them. If you liked the video, be sure to check out the next one, which will be in the divisional round. I'm sorry for the extra long video. There was just so much to do in this offseason.